Hello and welcome to lecture 31 of the course Computational Complexity. In the past lectures, we've seen different randomized complexity classes. In this lecture, we will see a high-level comparison between all of these randomized complexity classes. Right. So, what we will do is we will start with NP as a baseline, and then we will move to different randomized complexity classes. So let's take NP. So this is first to begin with. I will take NP. Okay. And there are two cases, right, when X is in the language and X is not in the language. So as you know, there is a computation tree and there are many non-deterministic choices made. If X is in the language, at least one of these non-deterministic choices lead to an acceptance. I will mark. So these circles denote various outcomes, right? So we know that if X is in the language, at least one of them lead to acceptance. Perhaps let's say two of them lead to acceptance. The acceptance I am denoting by green, and for all the rest, it will be red. And when X is not in the language, right, this will all be red, because it cannot have even one accepting computation path if X is not in the language, right. That is the definition of NP. Okay. So now let us see the randomized complexity classes. I will just copy paste this, copy. Sorry. Okay. So now let us move to. So can someone can we think of what co-NP would be? Co-NP is the kind of opposite of this. When X is in L, maybe I'll just write it without drawing a figure. Right. So co-NP means all green when X is in the language. And so this is just co-NP, and at least one red when X is not in the language. This is the co-NP. Anyway, I am not drawing a figure for it, but let's try to understand. Oh, sorry, the colors all changed here. That's okay. In the case of now, let us move to RP. Sorry. So in the case of RP, when X is in the language, at least half the inputs should be, accept. So it need not be contiguous, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So around half is now green, and the rest could be red when X is in the language. And when X is not in the language, all of it should be red. So in fact, let me take the easier route and do this, right. That is because when X is, that is the definition of RP. And let's move to co-RP now. Again, co-RP is a bit different. When X is in the language, everything should be accepted, right. That's what co-RP says. So all of them should be green. When X is not in the language, at least half should reject, or at most half should be green. So there should be at least half reds, or at most half greens. So maybe 7 of them could be red, right, or maybe. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So okay, sorry, there is an error in the RP, the earlier one. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7 there are 13 dots here, right. In the case of co-RP, when X is not in the language, at least half should be reject. At most half can be accept. Now let us move to ZPP. Again, ZPP introduces a new, we will stick to the first definition that we saw, where we said that um, there is a yes or there is a no or a don't know answer, right? So green will denote yes and red will denote no as before, but let's say blue denotes don't know. Okay, so blue denotes don't know for both of these figures. Green denotes yes and red denotes no. Or accept, reject. Sorry. Right. So when X is in the language, there can be rejects are not possible. It has to be accepts and don't knows, and at most half don't knows. Similarly, when X is not in the language, there can be only rejects and don't knows. We cannot have accepts, and there can be at most half don't knows, which is the case here. So there are 8 rejects and 5 don't knows. Right. This is the ZPP. Sorry. Right. So now let us see BPP. We'll stick to the first definition that we said, where we allowed which was in the terms of 2/3, 1/3. So when X is in the language, at least 2/3 should be accept, right? Which means the rejects will be a small number, something like this. And when X is not in the language, there can be at most 1/3 accept. So something like this. So out of 13, 4 is less than 1/3, right? This is the case with BPP. Finally, let us come to PP. Let's come to PP. When X is in the language, we said it can have, again, PP is also just accept, reject, there is no don't know. So we said it can have at most at least half accept. So 7 now. This will be considered as a yes instance, and when X is not in the language, right, at least half rejects. Again, because we have only 13 dots here, it's not possibly the lack of a gap is not really that apparent. You may think 7 and 6 is relatively large when we are dealing with 13 outcomes, but the point is that there is no requirement of a gap even if you had 1 million outcomes. So that could be you could have 500,000 accepts and 500,000 rejects for an yes instance, and 4.9999 accepts when X is not in the language also. So there is really no gap required for PP. So that is the situation with PP. Whereas in the case of BPP, there is a certain gap. So when there is yes, it is at least or significantly more than half accept, and when it is a no instance, significantly less than half or significantly more than half reject. And ZPP allows the don't knows, right? And at least half should be a accept reject output, which is the correct output. Co-RP, When X is in the language, all of it should be accept, and when X is not in the language, at most half should be accept. RP, when X is in the language, at least half should be accept. When X is not in the language, all should be reject. Again, NP requires at most or at least one when X is in the language, one accept, and when X is not in the language, it has to be all reject. So this is a kind of visual or pictorial summary of how each of these randomized complexity classes are supposed to behave, and and all of these are useful, perhaps except for PP, and hope this kind of gives you a good idea of how the probabilities work. Sometimes it's not easy to recall the definitions and exact numbers, and these kind of images tend to stick to one's mind. So that's all I want to share for this lecture. Thank you.